Welcome back to Violent Origins, where we uncover the brutal truths buried in humanity's past. I've always been fascinated by cave art, but not for the reasons you might think. Sure, everyone talks about those beautiful horses at Lascaux or the majestic bison at Altamira, but here's what they don't tell you. Hidden among those masterpieces are images that will make your skin crawl. Humans, deliberately murdered. Bodies pierced with multiple spears. And the artists? They took their time painting these scenes. They wanted us to remember. These aren't just pretty pictures on cave walls. They're crime scene reports from 30,000 years ago. And honestly, what I discovered while researching this episode genuinely disturbed me. Because the violence wasn't random, it was methodical, planned, and remembered. Today we're diving deep into humanity's first art to expose what it really reveals about our species' capacity for brutality. And trust me, this isn't the peaceful Stone Age story you learned in school. But before we explore the blood-soaked galleries of Ice Age Europe, we need to go much further back, to Africa. To a discovery that just shattered everything we thought we knew about when humans first began creating symbolic art. Just last year, in 2024, researchers confirmed something extraordinary: cave paintings in Indonesia depicting human-pig interactions that are over 51,000 years old. Think about that. When your ancestors were still figuring out how to survive the brutal Ice Age, other humans halfway across the world were already creating complex narrative scenes. But even that isn't the beginning. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, archaeologists uncovered evidence of symbolic behavior stretching back over 70,000 years. Pieces of ochre blood red iron oxide carved with crosshatch patterns, shell beads, bone tools used to mix pigments. And here's where it gets really fascinating. We weren't alone in this creative impulse. In Spanish caves like La Pasiega and Ardales, scientists found red symbols that are at least 64,000 years old. That's 20,000 years before modern humans even reached Europe. The artists, Neanderthals, our supposedly primitive cousins, had already mastered the art of symbolic representation while our ancestors were still confined to Africa. So this need to create, to mark our presence, to say, "I was here," it runs deeper than our species. It's something fundamental about intelligent minds. As modern humans spread across the globe, this artistic spark ignited everywhere. Sulawesi, Indonesia, 45,000 years ago. Australia's Kimberley region, 40,000 years. From frozen European caves to tropical Asian limestone chambers, humans began transforming dark underground spaces into galleries. And what did they paint? Animals, endless animals. For tens of thousands of years, cave walls were dominated by reindeer, cave lions, woolly rhinos, massive mammoths. The technical skill is breathtaking. These aren't crude stick figures. They're masterworks that rival anything in modern museums. But here's the puzzle that kept me awake at night while researching this. If these people were visual storytellers, if they could capture the essence of a charging bison in a few masterful strokes, why are humans almost entirely absent from their art? Children draw stick figures before they can speak in full sentences. It's natural for us to depict ourselves. So why did Ice Age artists, with all their incredible skill, avoid painting their own species? And when they finally did include humans in their work, well, that's where things get really dark. There's this romantic myth about our ancestors, the noble savage living in harmony with nature, free from the corruption of civilization. I get it. When you're staring at these beautiful cave galleries, there's something almost spiritual about the experience. The Aurignacian, Grevetian, Magdalenian cultures left behind art so vivid it takes your breath away. Herds of horses galloping across stone canvases, cave bears rendered with anatomical precision. You start to imagine this peaceful, artistic society living in balance with the natural world. But if you look closer, really look, that illusion starts to crack. Because scattered among all those majestic animal portraits, you find something else entirely. Something that reveals the true nature of Ice Age humanity. Let me take you to Pech Merle, a cave in southern France famous for its spotted horses. Recent DNA analysis suggests those spots might actually reflect real coat patterns from Ice Age horses. Incredible scientific accuracy. But move past those horses, deeper into the cave, and you'll discover something that changes everything. A human figure. Crude lines, roughly drawn. But the meaning is unmistakable. A person lying prone, arms and legs spread wide, with multiple spear-like objects piercing their body. Depending on how you count them, there are between 5 and 10 weapons embedded in this figure. This isn't accidental. This isn't abstract. This is a detailed depiction of murder. Nearby, there's another symbol, a placard-like shape. Some archaeologists think it's a bird. Others see it as territorial marking. But to me, it looks disturbingly familiar. Arms spread wide, legs apart, the universal human posture of dominance and aggression. Have you ever seen footage from North Sentinel Island? When outsiders approach, the Sentinelese don't run. They spread their limbs wide, shake their weapons, make themselves look bigger and more threatening. It's pure, primal intimidation. Could this 25,000-year-old symbol be showing us the same thing, the killer, standing over their victim in a display of absolute dominance? We can't know for certain. But the same symbol appears in nearby caves, possibly the signature of a particularly violent clan. And Pech Merle isn't alone. Just a short distance away, Cougnac Cave contains even more disturbing imagery. 2 human figures, both clearly being killed. One is tucked inside the outline of a giant deer, maybe symbolic, maybe literal camouflaged, but with 3 spears embedded in its back. The second figure is worse. He lies spread eagle, arms and legs extended, his entire body pierced with spears. Not just once, repeatedly. The weapons strike his limbs, torso, sides. This isn't a quick death. This is methodical, almost ritualistic violence. But why paint this? Why take precious time in the depths of a cave to carefully document scenes of murder? What kind of world were these artists living in? Here's what the archaeological evidence tells us. At the height of the Upper Paleolithic, around 37,000 years ago, Europe had fewer than 4,000 modern humans scattered across the entire continent. That's less than the crowd at a small-town high school football game, spread across millions of square kilometers. Their population density was roughly 3 people per 100 square kilometers. For comparison, even modern Mongolia, one of the least densely populated countries on Earth, has about 200 people per 100 square kilometers. These Ice Age Europeans were living in almost unimaginable isolation. Most groups consisted of 15 to 30 individuals, often extended families. Half were children. They were mobile, fluid, completely dependent on cooperation to survive in one of the harshest environments humans had ever faced. So large-scale warfare? Mass battles? Extremely unlikely. But personal violence? Intimate, brutal conflicts between individuals or small groups? That's a different story entirely. To understand this, anthropologists study modern hunter-gatherers. A landmark study examined lethal violence across 21 mobile foraging societies worldwide. The results are chilling. 55% of killings were one-on-one personal, emotional conflicts between individuals. 36% occurred within the same group, often between family members or close relatives. Only 15% involved separate communities, and even then, most weren't fought over territory. They fought over insults, over women, over status and shame. And here's the most disturbing part: these weren't accidents. Most killings were planned, deliberate, and remembered for years. Some became part of oral tradition, stories passed down through generations. In the Ice Age, with its tiny, isolated populations, violence may have been rare, but when it happened, it was intensely personal. And some of it was important enough to paint on stone, deep in sacred caves where it would last forever. So maybe these images weren't just random violence. Maybe they were lessons, visual warnings about what happens to traitors, to oath-breakers, to those who violated the strict taboos that kept these fragile societies intact. Or perhaps they were stories, characters from oral traditions, heroes and villains, meeting their fates at the hands of gods or spirits or cosmic justice. We'll never know for certain. But one thing is clear. The artists didn't paint these scenes by accident. They painted them with careful detail. They took time to remember them. And they placed them in caves that served as sacred spaces, where the community gathered for ceremonies that we can only imagine. But humans weren't always the killers in Ice Age art. Sometimes they were the victims. And that opens up an entirely different dimension of violence, a world where humans weren't always at the top of the food chain. Deep in the Lascaux cave complex lies one of the most mysterious and debated scenes in all of Upper Paleolithic art. It's called the shaft scene, and it's unlike anything else in the cave. A massive bison dominates the image, its stomach ripped open, intestines spilling out in vivid, almost anatomical detail. And in front of it lies a human figure sprawled out, limbs awkward, head bizarrely bird-like, as if he's wearing a mask or transforming into something else entirely. Nearby stands a staff topped with a bird. The whole scene feels narrative, like a frozen moment from an epic story. Interpretations vary wildly. Some see shamanic trance, a spiritual journey where human and animal merge. Others see symbolic meaning we can't even begin to understand. But I think it's simpler and more brutal than that. I believe we're looking at a failed hunt. The bird-topped staff, a spear thrower. The spear found its mark in the bison's gut butt. A gut shot doesn't kill instantly. So the massive animal turned, gored the hunter, left him dying on the ground while the bison itself bled out nearby. It's my interpretation, but it fits the evidence. And it reminds us that in the Ice Age, humans were often prey as much as predators. What do you think is happening in this scene? Shamanic vision? Failed hunt? Something else entirely? Drop your theories in the comments below. I genuinely want to hear your interpretations of this mysterious image. At another site, Roc-de-Sers, we find a carved frieze showing a human figure seemingly fleeing from a charging animal, probably a bison or aurochs. The beast leans forward aggressively, body low and fast, frozen mid-strike. The human is caught recoiling, arms raised defensively. There's raw energy in the stone, an implied moment just before impact or maybe just after a narrow escape. Some scholars see symbolic meaning. Others think it's literal danger remembered in stone. The moment when a hunter misjudged their prey and faced the consequences. It's one of the rare surviving glimpses of the cost of failure in the Ice Age. And, honestly, there's something almost darkly comic about the human's expression, that universal oh shit moment when everything goes wrong. But perhaps the most unsettling image comes from Gabillou Cave. A creature is carved into the wallet's body, unmistakably bison-like, but its torso and limbs humanoid. The head is ambiguhorns, mask, something in between man and beast. The figure seems wounded, with incised lines suggesting injury or pain. Its posture is twisted, as if writhing in agony. Is this a shaman in mid-transformation? A symbolic merging of hunter and hunted? I've always thought of it as simply a bison shaman, but, in the context of all these other violent images, it might be something darker. A ritual practitioner wounded during a dangerous ceremony. Or maybe a cautionary tale about the risks of crossing boundaries between human and animal worlds. Here's what's fascinating. Various indigenous cultures of the North American plains wore bison costumes during ceremonial practices. Two cultures, separated by continents and tens of thousands of years, independently developed similar concepts. It makes you wonder what fundamental human experiences drive these parallels. The scenes from Lascaux, Roc-de-Sers, and Gabillou feel different from the brutal murders at Pech Merle and Cougnac. These aren't literal documentation. There's something between memory and myth, reality and belief. These Ice Age cultures were incredibly complex, rich with ritual, belief, and imagination. Their myths were probably as strange and vibrant as anything from ancient Greece or Mesopotamia. We just don't know their stories. We can only see their images. So, when we see a man with a bird's head, or a bison with human arms, maybe it's not a memory of what happened, but something that was believed. And somewhere in those beliefs, violence played a role not just as danger, but as meaning. What strikes me most about researching this topic is how recent discoveries keep forcing us to update our understanding. Just this year, researchers found new evidence that children some as young as 2 years old were actively creating cave art alongside adults. Think about that. In these dangerous, oxygen-depleted cave environments, families were bringing toddlers to participate in artistic and likely spiritual ceremonies. Some researchers now believe children served as mediators between the physical and spirit worlds. This isn't just ancient history. Similar practices exist among indigenous societies worldwide, the San of the Kalahari, various Maya and Inca cultures, Australian Aboriginal groups. Children as spiritual bridges, their innocence making them perfect conduits for communicating with other realms. Which brings us back to those violent images. If cave art was partly spiritual, partly ceremonial, partly educational, then the murder scenes weren't just historical records. They were teaching tools, warning stories, spiritual narratives about the consequences of breaking sacred laws. When we think about cave art, we often imagine beauty and wonder. And yes, there's incredible beauty in these ancient galleries. But hidden among those masterpieces is something more uncomfortable: death, violence, vulnerability. These weren't just artists creating pretty pictures. They were hunters, shamans, survivors, living in one of the most challenging environments humans had ever faced. People with complex social structures, strict moral codes, and very real consequences for those who violated community trust. Their art reflects that reality, not just the majesty of the animal world, but the brutal facts of human nature. Even after 30,000 years, these images still have the power to disturb us. They remind us that behind every mark on the cave wall was a person not so different from us, trying to make sense of their violent, beautiful, terrifying world. And maybe that's the most unsettling truth of all. We like to think we've evolved beyond our ancestors' brutality, that civilization has made us more humane. But these cave paintings suggest otherwise. The capacity for both extraordinary creativity and methodical violence that's been with us from the very beginning. If you've made it this far into humanity's dark artistic origins, you're officially part of the Violent Origins tribe. Subscribe for more shocking archaeological discoveries that reveal the brutal truths about our species' past. Drop a comment telling me which piece of cave art you found most haunting: the methodical murder scenes, the failed hunt at Lascaux, or the mysterious human-animal hybrids. Do you think these images were historical records, spiritual beliefs, or something else entirely? And here's a question that still keeps me up at night. If our ancestors were documenting violence 30,000 years ago, what does that tell us about human nature itself? Are we fundamentally peaceful beings corrupted by civilization, or naturally violent creatures temporarily restrained by social contracts? Thanks for descending into the darkness with me. Until next time, this is Violent Origins, where we uncover the savage truths hidden in humanity's past. Arrivederci.